All right, what's up, guys? We are back with another podcast episode. Hope you guys enjoyed your week. This week, we honestly don't have that much. It was kind of a slow news week. I mean, we hit some paddles. We have some stuff in the kitchen to talk about. And beyond that, like, there wasn't much. I mean, MLP happened this week, and there's a couple things to chat about from that.
It's, our California audience is going to be pretty mad with us 2 weeks in a row with slightly shorter pods.
Sorry, California, but here's the thing. We did a 2.5 hour one, so now we just have to reset the clock. So we got to do like 2 or 3 short ones, and then we get back to like the hour-long ones.
Yep.
You can, sometimes though, when the news is a little slow, it's kind of nice. It usually means there's not a lot of drama in pickleball, which is
probably a good thing.
Lovely.
Yes.
But the first thing we have to talk about, you're wearing a normal melon hat this week.
Oh, normal? What do you mean normal?
For those of you who were listening last week, Isaac had on this old melon hat, and the people spoke. And they did not like your hat.
Look, people were not a fan, and it's okay. I don't mind the comments, the hate on the hat. I honestly, I got a lot of good laughs out of it.
Well, this was the funniest one. The funniest comment I saw on YouTube was, your brother looks like a Filipino who's really obsessed with Super Mario, but also thinks he looks cool at the gym with that hat. I'm pretty sure that was the most upvoted comment last week. And that was...
First of all, I would never wear that hat to the gym. Second of all, is a great hat. And I'm okay with people hating on it.
You know what? I'm going to have to say the more modern melon hats are a little bit better these days.
That's great.
But you guys definitely gave us some good laughs. Good laughs in the Discord and on YouTube.
I got a lot of really good laughs. I laughed at a lot of the comments on that hat. I thought it was really funny. So yeah, it was good. It was funny.
There was definitely some funny ones. All right, so had to put that out there. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed the sale from last week. Hope you guys picked up some good gear. I know a bunch of you messaged me. Actually, a lot of people messaged me about the melon hats. Mm-hmm. They were like, yep, picked up a melon hat. So that's cool. But there was a bunch of other gear. I know people were kind of all over the Spartus, and there was a number of other paddles that people were really hoping to pick up. So hope you guys are enjoying the gear. If you've got it by now, hope you're playing with it.
Yeah.
So, cool. Anyways, let's talk about MLP really quick. First thing that I have to say is this outdoor venue, probably one of the best I have seen from like from the photos and videos, and even looking at the stream. The setup for it, like there was a bridge in the back where people in Central Park could stop by and watch. Like the whole setup just looked amazing.
It did look really nice. Like being in Central Park, the weather was great. Like the whole setup looked great.
Yeah, if there was an MLP to go to this year, I feel like it was probably this one. Like that looked really cool.
Yeah. I'll be honest though, like I didn't even really know what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it was happening, but I guess I just, again, and maybe this was the case, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't. Pretty sure this was just how they've been doing MLP all year. Mm-hmm. When there's no winner at the end, my motivation to watch is extremely low. When it's just points, I just don't really care.
Same. It's so much more boring to watch if it's like, oh, they won, but at least they just got points.
On Sunday when I tune in, I'm like, oh, okay, these guys made it to the final. This will be a fun matchup. But now it's just like, oh, okay, maybe this is the first match they've won all weekend.
Yep.
I don't know. So that's why I didn't really watch a bunch. The weekend also just was kind of packed. But
yeah, it was busy.
As far as the venue went, looked amazing. I think it seemed like they knocked that out of the park. I haven't heard any complaints, which love that. Actually, the only thing I did see, I caught a dream breaker between, I think it was Columbus and the New York Hustlers. And
I think I saw some highlights from that.
Well, it seemed like Jack did not like the court because several of his dream breaker points, he kept falling over and slipping. Falling. And he actually did throw his paddle after he went back to the bench, he just threw his paddle.
Yeah.
But so maybe there was something with the court not being gritty enough or something, but I did see a couple falls there.
But yeah, other than that, I didn't see anyone talking about bad bounces or the court being too small or anything like that. So
yeah,
props to them for good setup.
Yeah, that looked really good. The only other two things I caught. One, the serves at MLP just seemed absolutely out of hand. Seemed unhinged.
Dude, I'm honestly getting so sick and tired of all these ridiculous serve rule changes. It's like, it's so inconsistent right now. Let's just have one uniform rule across the board for people to get used to. It's like, oh, PPA, people are getting called for like barely lifting the ball, and then you go to MLP and people are hitting overheads.
Yeah.
I mean, like, did you see Colin Johns literally swinging over his shoulder?
It was
It's
so
just,
high.
it was so dumb.
It's so funny to see him swing that high too, because you're so used to him just kind of like
barely
putting the
tapping
ball in
it.
play. Yeah, now he's just like
Literally hitting shoulder high serves. I'm getting really sick of it. I'm not
almost
a
to
fan.
the point with how ridiculous it's starting to look for these serves. I'm almost to the point where I would rather them just go to a drop serve. And
Yeah.
I don't want that for myself because I don't think personally I like being able to toss the ball up a little bit. It feels a little bit better for me. And I also just think it looks sillier.
Yes.
But we're to the point now where every serve rule we have tried to implement just is either inconsistent, can't be enforced, or something where I'm like, this just seems like the only way. And did you see that Instagram clip of Kwong doing some drop serves?
Yes.
It looked like a monster.
Gosh, dude, his serves are insane.
I mean, they were going to be insane regardless. It's Kwong, but still.
Yeah. Still, those are nuts. And see, I kind of like the drop serve for the fact that it's extremely easy to regulate.
Yeah.
I like that. I'm not a huge fan of how it looks.
Yeah.
As long as, and I think this was talked about on another podcast. I can't remember which one. It might have been Zane. But anyways, as long as we're not having people dropping it from above their heads. Like in Padel, they can like kind of throw the ball down and whatnot. So as long as we're not like getting on our tippy toes and dropping it from, that's when it looks really dumb.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Could you imagine Deckel reaching all the way above his head to drop a serve? Like that would just look so silly.
I almost just want them to do a tournament with a drop serve. Like if we're going to experiment, why don't we just try this for one?
That's what I'm saying. At this point, if we're changing the serve rule like mid-tournament every other week or every week, then why not? Just do it for one tournament, see how it goes. If the audience complains that it looks dumb, okay, don't do it. But like...
We'll say it's funny because I don't even know that it's really the pickleball viewers that you have to be worried about. I mean, yeah, some of us, are, like pickleball people, are going to think it looks dumb, but it's more... the outside of pickleball people that are like, oh, what, these guys drop the ball even less athletic.
Yeah, exactly.
See, it's weird. I wonder why in Padel, like, I mean, I'm not in the Padel circle, so maybe people talk about this in there, but they drop the ball and no one seems to go, oh yeah, Padel's a stupid sport.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a combination of a lot of things of probably why that is, but
I'd have to look into it and see, kind of dive into that community and see what they're saying about it. But yeah, I've never heard anything. Like, and when it comes to Padel, people do not say, oh, these guys are unathletic. It takes no skill. Like, dude, those guys are insane.
Yeah.
That
well, it
sport
helps
is
when they're
wild.
doing insane things like running out the door, hitting a tweener onto the other side of the court. I mean, yeah, it just looks...
Tweener ATP outside of a box. Like, there's just so many ridiculous things they do. But yeah, I'm not a fan of refs calling faults in warm-up in a PPA on Deckel.
Oh, to me, that's hilarious. I think that's funny.
I thought it was funny, but I'm like, this is stupid. And then she keeps calling a fault on him. Then he wants like a head ref to come over. I think it was Don Stanley. Head ref comes over. He looks at one serve and goes, yep, looks good. And then that ref calling him, she goes, oh yeah, now it looks good. He literally did the same thing. You're only saying it looks good because Don said it looked good. So I'm like,
That's funny.
it's so infuriating to me. I just do not like that it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
Make up a good rule, make it easy to regulate,
Yeah.
and stick to it. That's all I want.
Might be the drop serve. Who knows?
Honestly, we might have to.
All right, last thing I want to talk about from MLP, because I did catch this match. But DC got absolutely blown out of the water by the fives in women's. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a beatdown worse than this.
Yeah, this is brutal.
25-8. I didn't even know that was possible in MLP.
In rally scoring, that's tough. That
Like,
hurts.
That means you just did nothing.
Yeah, you didn't really do much.
I feel
That
like
sucks.
Anna Lee was out for blood after losing to Rachel in that final.
I was going to say, I think she was a little salty after losing.
I think she might have just said, you know what? I'm going to end your career here.
Yeah, I didn't really get to watch that match, but 25-8, dude. That's insane. I've never... Is that the biggest blowout in MLP
It's got to be
history?
close. I know I think I've seen some others that were under 10, but I don't know if they were lower than 8.
I haven't seen many.
Any lower than 8 would be crazy.
Any lower than 8 would be wild, but anything like... I feel like anything 14 and below is a blowout.
Yeah, I would agree.
If it's like 14 or 15 and below, you
especially if you're going to 25.
25. Yeah, true.
Even to 21 below 14 felt like a blowout.
Because rally scoring is just always very close. They're almost always within, like, score differential's always within like 2 points.
Yeah.
It's always super close.
Yeah.
So 25-8, that's insane.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Okay, next thing I want to talk about. So I sent you a link this morning to kind of look over, and we'll go over this a little bit. But I've talked about this in a video before, and I think I've talked about it on a podcast, but PB Vision is a website that does, like, you upload game footage and it does analytics of your match, and it does a lot of really cool things. And it was already pretty cool. It would have been like spring of this year, one of the first times I messed with it. It's when I went to the US Open. And it was already pretty cool, but you could tell certain things were limited. Now PB Vision is really cool. It's not perfect. There's definitely some flaws with it, but it's gotten extremely cool. So one of the things it does, and we'll pop up B-roll so you guys can kind of see some of this, but it has what they're calling the Shot Explorer, and I think this is probably the most valuable thing of this tool by a long shot right now. So let's say you record a bunch of games. Let's say you record 3 games, and you just know that day your backhand drop was terrible. Well, finding every single backhand drop and getting to watch them sucks. Even
Takes
as
a
someone
lot of time
that edits videos and can do that reasonably quickly, that is going to take a while, and it's going to be really annoying. With this, the Shot Explorer, you can click on all the different people, and you can filter by anything you want from each of them. So, like, you could filter backhand third shot drops. You could filter backhand return, forehand return. Like, you can kind of filter by almost anything.
Pretty much.
It has a lot of options. But then what it does is after you do that filter, so let's say I selected me, backhand drop. Now I can see all my backhand drops from that match and figure out what the heck I did wrong, and I can watch them all back.
Yep.
So I think that is really cool because there's so many different ways you can filter. You can also filter by, like, the last shot of a rally for each player. So you could kind of see, like, were you getting attacked? Were you making unforced errors? Like, I think there's cool ways to kind of, it just makes everything faster. Because when I watch my videos back, it takes forever to do this.
Yes. And sometimes it's nice because when you're just watching raw footage, it's easy to just, like, miss things.
Yeah.
And, like, where you messed up and whatnot. This will just tell you, like, you either hit a good shot, a bad shot, like how deep are you hitting your serve returns?
Yeah.
Is it good,
the percentages.
bad? Your percentages, like I'm looking at it right now. Okay, I'm looking at my profile for this match that we put in here. My shot accuracy was 92%.
For which shot, though?
Just overall match.
Oh,
the
just
overall
overall
match,
match.
my shot accuracy was 92%. I think I hit 5% of my shots into the net. It shows me my court coverage distance, and it gives a cool, like, top-down heat map of where my movement was on the court, which I thought was pretty cool. So it gives you a ton of stuff. And then a new feature that I've seen now is it gives you a 3D view of the court for your third shots. So you can adjust angled view, a top-down view, and it gives you the path.
You can even, like, just zoom around.
You can just,
like,
you can spin it around. Yep, I thought
and
that was
it'll show
actually
you, like, the arc of that shot. And the nice thing is, if you look at that, you can actually change it from third shots to returns, fifths, and I think there might be 1 or 2 other options.
Yep.
But that's really cool because, one, it could show you, like, okay, what was your serve return pattern in this match? Where were you tending to drop? How high were some of these drops? And if PB Vision thinks it's bad, it will mark it in red.
Yes.
So whether that was an error or it was high or whatever, like, and then you can tap on the little dot in that view and it'll take you to that point to watch. So the whole thing is extremely cool. I mean, even for me, what it immediately made me think of is, okay, I can see my serve depth and return percentage. Those 2 things alone, I was like, this is, if I see, let's just say, like, only 30% were deep, well, then I probably know I should start serving or returning deeper. And if I record the next match and see I successfully did that, you could also probably see that your third percentage went up because you were getting weaker returns back or, you know, whatever.
Yep.
So I think that's really cool.
It is really nice, like, just as a training tool, you put in a match and then you recognize, like, hey, I'm hitting, my backhand dink is off or my return spot is off, like where you're trying to return to. And then you go play another match and it will tell you in real time whether you adjusted appropriately and, like, did it well. Like, that's what I like the most about it, is seeing if you did things well or not, and it just tells you right away instead of like having to go back, cut through footage, watch it all. It just takes way too much time. This is really nice. I actually really like it, but there's a few. It's not perfect.
Yeah, there's definitely still some bugs. I'm making a little document for them right now with just like as I was going through some of my matches this week, some bugs I noticed. And it's not really worth going over a lot of them, but there's just certain things where like one or two times it would think I hit a shot, but it was actually my partner. And I can see why I got confused because the way the camera was, like we were both right next to each other and we both kind of swung.
Yep.
So you can't really see. So like, I'm sure for the AI to figure that out, it's going to take a lot more data and time to get there. And then there's just certain bugs about like, I would set playback speed on desktop to slower to see my shots better. And then it would reset back to normal speed. I'm sure it's all things that'll get figured out.
It's also kind of choppy sometimes when I try to go to the shot explorer and I would click on a shot and I'd try to watch it back, but it was really jumpy and choppy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that wasn't great, but I'm
One
sure
thing that
these things
helps
will get
too,
fixed.
I don't know if you did this, but so in the shot explorer, you can set like, if you said, show me all my third shot drops, you can say, show me one shot before the third shot drop, two shots before and three.
Yep.
And what I find is it's best to say two shots before and like two shots after and then slow it down because then you can see the whole thing leading up and it feels like a better.
It flows better.
It flows better. I actually think the default should show you. Shot Explorer should always default to two shots before and two shots after.
Yep.
Because I think it just makes it way easier to watch. Because sometimes the shots go by so fast that you're like, whoa, I don't even know what I just watched.
Exactly. You have no clue what happened. And it's kind of cool now, like instead of just having just the footage of you seeing a shot, there's a lot of animations on screen and like it just looks nicer.
Yeah.
There's things to like make it more eye appealing. So far it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I have a feeling that, I'm sure we'll get a lot of use out of this.
Yeah, I'm going to start uploading more and more of my matches. One thing I actually noticed this week, looking at a couple of my matches from League, is that I think my fifths are oddly kind of weak. Like on most of my matches, I can't remember what they call it. Basically, just like how good they thought that shot was
shot
pretty.
Quality?
Yeah, shot quality was pretty low. I think I was like 50, 60%. And I was like, I don't know if that's normal for me or if I just had an off day, but I was like, fifth is not a shot that I would have thought in my head I was not. I just don't even think about it. You know what I mean?
Right. I actually was, funny enough, having a conversation with Kyle Kazuto about that the other day. Excuse me. He sent out a text to, I guess, a bunch of people just asking, like, what do you think you need to get better at? And I was talking about that. I was like, well, you start getting to the higher level that you're like, your opponent's fourth shot gets way more aggressive and getting to the kitchen obviously gets way harder. So I was actually just talking about fifth shots. And that's,
nice.
it's definitely something you don't think about often, but when you do, you realize it's probably not a shot you're very good at.
Yeah, totally. So, no, I thought that was pretty interesting. Definitely check PB Vision out. I'm pretty sure it's free right now. I don't even think they're charging for it, to my knowledge. So there's really no reason not to try it. Get a phone tripod. They have information on the website. You have to be able to see the entire court from like a corner view, so you can't cut off parts of the baseline when you film. But give it a shot because I think it's really cool. And I think if you're a serious pickleball player, like a tournament player, this is a tool that could make improving a lot faster.
If you already like going back and watching game footage, this will just make your life 10 times easier.
Yeah, way easier.
Like infinitely easier.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, moving on to our main topic. So we tested a handful of paddles this Friday.
Yeah.
And we just wanted to talk about them. So some of these have been out for a minute. Some of these are newer. And we'll just go from there. So first one I want to start with, Proton Series 4.
Yep.
So first, I already know, I can already see the comments coming. People are going to say, why haven't you reviewed the Proton Series 1? Well, Proton has still not given me clear answers about that paddle. So when they give me clear answers about whether there is issues with them being too sticky or not, I will happily review them. In fact, I've been looking forward to trying them out. But Proton likes to dodge my questions there.
Until then.
Till my knowledge, the Proton Series 4 has no problems. So I will happily talk about it.
Yes.
Okay, so going into this paddle, I think my expectations were kind of low.
Yep.
Because for a couple reasons. One, the paddle's $300, which is insane. There's not a lot of paddles that go past $300.
Yeah.
And if you're going to charge $300, you better be good.
It better be something interesting.
So that was one of my first things. The second thing is there was nothing really about it that seemed interesting on paper. So it's a Kevlar surface, it's edgeless, and then it's using a triple core system, kind of like the Diadem Warrior did back in the day, where
sandwiched.
Yep, Nomex in the middle, and then 2 polymer on the edges. So I was like, okay, like we've kind of seen this. It's not been that interesting. Like, what are we going to see here? Mm-hmm. But hitting it, I was actually pretty pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, sweet spot was definitely bigger than expected.
Yep.
It was easier to reset with than I thought. It didn't feel as unstable as most edgeless paddles that I played with felt. Like if I'm trying to think of paddles compared to like an Amped Pro or a Lux.
For Amped Pro, the Proton's below that.
Yeah,
blows that
not
out of
even
the water.
close.
Yeah, not even close.
The Proton, the Series 4 felt way better than an Amped Pro.
Yeah.
They're super gritty, so spin was, fine.
Yep.
Nothing insane, but usable. It was interesting. I definitely thought it played totally fine. Not something I would want to switch to. But yeah, my big issue is that price tag is ridiculous, man. Yeah. I can't recommend that paddle to anyone.
Not for $300. There's no way.
Not even close.
The way I look at it, an interesting thing for like paddles, and one thing that I kind of always think about is like, okay, a paddle, most paddles these days aren't really bad. It almost just comes down to good or bad value. Mm-hmm. So for example, like this Proton in terms of edgeless paddles is good.
Yeah,
like I think
it's on the upper end.
On as far as edgeless paddles go, I think it's on the upper end of performance, especially for sweet spot size. So you have all these things that kind of stack in its favor. So like it's pretty quick in the hand. The swing weight was only like 114. Yep. Power at the baseline was definitely better than I expected for an edgeless paddle.
Yeah.
Spin, totally fine. Reset's pretty good. So like if you had a bar of like this paddle is good and this paddle's bad, all these things are stacking it toward the good side. Mm-hmm. And then once you get to value for all those things that it has, it immediately slides back down. It doesn't slide down to the bottom. It's not like this is a bad paddle.
No.
But I would probably slot it like below the middle half of that, like toward the bad end, because it's like, okay, for $300, what could you buy? You could buy 3 jelly beans. You could buy 3 Vatic Prism flashes. You could buy
2 filths.
You could basically buy 2 filths. You could buy 2 Hirache X pluses. You could buy 2 J2Ks. Like, I mean, the list can go.
So many paddles.
Yeah, the list could go on and on. When you're at $300, you are literally competing against every single paddle on the market.
Yeah.
So there's not like, I feel like you're just under more scrutiny because it's expensive.
100%. I mean, look at when Selkirk first released their Labs paddles.
Yeah,
and they were $333. Everyone was like, this thing better be really, really good, because for that price, and I mean, the 002 obviously has been used forever. That's still...
Well, and at the time that was released, that paddle was like ahead of the curve.
Yeah, it was the only paddle that did what it did of its kind. So back then it made sense. Obviously the 001 was a massive flop.
Yeah.
But like even in today's market, there's still not that many paddles that are above that $300 range. And everything that's close to there, $275, $280, you're looking at the 3S's, you're looking at a mod, you're looking at the gearbox, like even the paddle techs, those are...
220.
Is it 220?
220, 230.
Okay. Still, like, there's just so many better paddles. For $300, it does not make any sense.
Yeah. Basically, I could recommend it to someone if they're really dead set on edgeless, they wanted something with a better sweet spot for edgeless, and they said money is no object.
Yeah.
But if money is an object, then it's like, okay, I could probably steer people towards other paddles that I think would just be better.
100%. And for $300, it's edgeless, so it's going to start to look ugly. It's going to chip, possibly crack the edge. It's going to start break down. My biggest issue is Proton's entire business model is built around, we want to make products that last longer, don't break down, and will essentially last forever, right? That's what they want with their nanotech technology, blah, blah, blah.
Well, that to me seems like the biggest miss.
Why
would you not put nanotech on this? That is like...
Exactly.
That is the thing that you built your entire company on, or the thing that gets everyone excited.
Mm-hmm.
This is not that.
You mock other companies for making a peel ply raw carbon fiber face, and then you do it yourself when you say that, we're sole mission is to make long lasting paddles, and then you make something that is going to break down and not potentially last that long.
Yeah.
I just think that's really silly. It just doesn't make sense.
It feels like a big miss. To me, like I understand you probably are going to have to diversify your lineup a little bit. Like if you look at Gearbox back in the day, they were so dead set on the SST cores.
Yep.
And everyone was still on polymer and like having a hard time adjusting. It was like, okay, you kind of need a polymer paddle to get people in the door to then go try this. Right. And maybe that's what Proton's thinking here. But at $300, I have a hard time believing that that's your entry item to then get someone on a NanoTac.
Right.
But if that is the thing that separates your company and everyone's been really excited about, I feel like that should have been on this paddle because then it's like, okay, now we're talking about something pretty cool here.
You can maybe start to justify that higher price, but even still, like $300 is ridiculous.
Because at the rate the paddles are lasting right now, and if these Protons are lasting as long as they say, like that is a big marketing point that I think can help justify that higher price.
Oh, totally. Yeah. If someone actually at a tournament level 5.0 plus player or qualifier player is getting 4, 5, maybe 6 months out of a paddle, that's way better than what most people are getting,
week, 2 weeks, maybe 3.
2 weeks, 3, maybe a month. Like it would make way more sense at that point. But because it's peel ply, it's Kevlar, and it just does not.
And even looking under the microscope, they talk about like, oh, we have these exposed Kevlar fibers that will like make the spin last longer, blah, blah, blah. Like I looked under a microscope and I couldn't see anything that looked different. In fact, it almost kind of looked like when you look at a Pro XR under the microscope, there's these little dots in the peel ply, and this kind of had that. So I don't know if it's using the same thing, but I didn't notice anything. That doesn't mean that they aren't doing that, but at least to my microscope, I couldn't see anything that looked immediately different.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think if the paddle, I don't know where it would have to be priced. If it was like in that $200 range.
180 to 200 would be more acceptable. I'm at the point now where your paddle has to be performing extremely good or doing something very different that is valuable to people to be over $200 at all. Because there's so many good paddles below the 200 to 180 range. It's like, it doesn't make sense. Why would you spend that much money if you can get other products that perform just as well?
Yeah, totally.
It just doesn't make sense to me. So like it makes sense with the gearbox, the Yola, when the Ripple comes out, like it makes way more sense because those are way different. You can't get those products, that type of material anywhere else. So yeah, it's justified. But with something that's Kevlar, edgeless like this, there's so many other paddles. Even in my opinion, the Ant Pro or the Power Air and the Lux, those in my opinion are still overpriced.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Can't recommend it.
So it's, again, and when we say that, like, it's fine. Like, if you have the money to blow, go for it. Like, I think it performs well.
If you want to support that company and you like edgeless and you think it looks nice and that's what you want, go for it. I think the paddle performs okay.
Yeah.
Just not for most people to spend that much money.
Agreed. Well, I agree. All right. Next thing. So we have 3 Honolulu paddles. Yes. So these have been on my radar forever. The house move like really slowed it down. I thought I was going to have a Honolulu review in July, and that did not happen. So we took these out because they have the new J2 Ti. They've had for a while the J2k 14 millimeter, the J2k Pro, and then obviously the 16 millimeter.
Yep.
I thought I grabbed the 16 millimeter when we went out to hit because that was the one I wanted to hit, but I accidentally grabbed the 14. And I'm almost more glad I grabbed that. I still need to hit the 16 to get some thoughts, but we'll get to that. So we'll start with the 14 millimeter. So I started hitting this thing, and so with how stable the J2k 16 millimeter is for a hybrid, I was like, okay, that's going to make the 14 pretty cool. And I think that's pretty much what it did. I actually liked that 14 a lot.
Yeah, you really enjoyed playing with it. I wasn't a massive fan of it.
Yeah.
I was okay with it. Like I could use it, but I wouldn't want to bring it to a tournament. You, on the other hand, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, it fits a lot of things I like. Like it's quicker in the hand, especially for a 14. It's stable. The pop off of it was really nice. It's definitely a stiffer paddle, so with the net, you get some more punch off of it. But I feel like because of their shape, that 14 millimeter does not feel nearly as bad as a lot of 14 millimeters do on the market. And I'm sure if I added a little bit of lead, that would make it even better.
Oh yeah, totally.
So I thought the 14 felt really nice.
My biggest issue is the stability you get out of it being a little bit wider at the bottom is nice, but just sacrifice so much usable handle.
Yeah,
that
for sure. I mean,
it's a huge downside for me.
I think that is like it's their handles with their hybrid shape are at the absolute limit for me. Where like I'm not really happy doing anything two-handed with it, but like I can do it.
It's just not as comfortable.
Yeah. Like I can put it there, but it's just like more of my hand is hanging off and it just feels like, it's harder to squeeze. But it's just a trade-off.
Yep.
Do you want more handle or do you want more stability?
Exactly.
Probably a lot of people would just rather have the stability.
Oh, I'm guaranteed most people would rather have the stability.
Yeah.
It's a very specific niche thing that I recognize being me is
Totally.
the issue. But yeah, the J2k 14 was nice. It felt good. I would say I liked it more than the 6014s, but I didn't like it as much as like the
Olympus?
well, obviously the Olympus, but that's kind of in a different realm.
Sure.
The Mage Pro, the QDEF.
You liked the Mage Pro more.
Yes, I like the Mage Pro more. I think that paddle felt better, had a better sweet spot, and I just enjoyed the feedback I got off of that paddle more than the J2k 14.
It probably would be. I'd have to take both of them out and hit them side by side because those probably are two decent paddles.
Pretty
to
comparable.
compare, yeah.
Yeah, totally. So personally, I would rather have the Mage Pro, but I think they're both good paddles. They're just barely different.
Sure. So the next one is the J2K Pro, and this one's interesting.
Yes.
So the J2K Pro that we have is 16 millimeter, and is definitely, for a 16, definitely on the stiffer side of paddles. And it's very interesting. Hitting the J2K Pro and the J2K 14 millimeter side by side feel like such similar paddles.
They're so similar.
Like they're both really stiff. I feel like pop has got to be pretty similar overall. To me, it just came down to like a smidge more stability on the J2K Pro and maybe a little bit more pop on the 14 millimeter. And like, it's just a tiny bit easier to maneuver with it being thinner. But like, if I had to tell someone to pick one, it would be hard to tell them which to pick.
Yeah, it really comes down to really niche things like what your play style is. So it's actually perfect between you and I. So you like lighter, faster, poppier paddles. So the J2K 14 fits you really great. Me, on the other hand, I don't mind swinging a heavier paddle, and I really enjoy that heavy plow through feel.
Yeah.
So I like 16 millimeter paddles more. So I actually really enjoyed this J2K Pro, but they're so similar feel wise. It's just a matter of what shots you like to feel better. The J2K Pro felt better at the baseline, hitting drives, had a little bit more power to it and more plow through, where the J2K 14, a little bit better in hands battles, a little bit faster, not quite as stable. It's just a sacrifice. Do you want to sacrifice the weight of it and a little heavier swing weight, or do you want to sacrifice the sweet spot?
Yeah.
That's all you have to come down to. But they're so similar.
Yeah. I feel like those two could almost have their own comparison video because it's like, yeah, I mean, it was two paddles that it was like, normally I feel like there's a larger difference, but these two I was like, okay, these are pretty, for being a 14 to 16, I was surprised how similar they were.
Totally. And for a lot of people, I think, I know personally a lot of people that have wrist injuries. And if you can't swing a heavier paddle because you have a weaker wrist or just have some prior injury, I think a lot of people actually really enjoy the J2K 14. It's a bit harder to find really poppy 14 hybrid shape paddles.
Yeah. Totally. So yeah, that's the J2K 14 and the Pro, and then the last one we brought out was the J2 Ti, which is the new one everyone's been talking about. And I thought the paddle was pretty good overall. I mean, to me, it kind of just seemed like, well, okay, since we haven't really talked about this yet, I don't even really think we need to talk about it. It's been beat to death by probably everyone in pickleball.
Been covered everywhere.
The whole, it's not really titanium, it's polyester threads, all these things coated in a titanium color, blah, 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 all these things.
Yep.
What a mess. I mean, geez Louise, like, so Will was here when that news first got broke, so I didn't really get to keep up with it.
Yep.
And then after he left, we had so many things to do for the giveaway that it took me a while to catch up. And then after I just kind of read a lot of comments, I was like, oh my word, like.
It's just really annoying. And not the fact of like, oh, it's not actually titanium, blah, blah, blah. I'm annoyed at all the people that are getting really upset that it's not. What I find dumb is like, okay, I hand you this paddle. I tell you it's titanium. You really like how it plays. You really like how it feels. But then I tell you, oh, it's not actually titanium, and then you get upset. It's like eating a food and you really enjoy it, but then I tell you it's something like, I don't know, cow tongue. You go, oh, it's so gross. You just told me you liked it, and now you're upset because I told you what it actually is.
I agree with most of that. So I agree that if you think it's good, it's good. Like, to me, I don't care if you call it pixie dust.
Exactly.
If I think the thing feels good, great.
Yeah.
Whatever the thing is, awesome. Let's keep using it.
Yep.
So, like, the concept of these polyester threads, whatever all of it is woven into carbon fiber, I think it plays nice. I like how it feels.
Yeah.
However, the thing that I do think people have like more of a right to complain about is you're like being sold on the concept of like, so like titanium, like, okay, like it's a metal people are like more familiar with and it sounds like fancy.
Like iPhones are made of, they use that as their marketing. It's like, oh, my phone's made of titanium.
Exactly.
It's used everywhere.
I think it just becomes like it almost just feels like you were misled, like,
yes,
in terms of like a marketing thing. And now so far it seems like the companies weren't intentionally misleading. It just seems like there was a bit of like the supplier who makes this stuff to the factories, to the companies seem to have been like a
little miscommunication.
Yeah, a pretty bad miscommunication. So
yeah.
I understand why people would be upset in that sense, because you almost feel like, hey, you lied to me. Like, yeah, I like this, but it's not what you said it was. So
totally.
Now moving forward, can I like really trust what you said? So I think that's where I think I'm like, I understand why people are upset, but I still agree that like, okay, well, I still think I don't really care that it's this polyester thread because I still think it feels good.
Mm-hmm. Now, performance-wise. Now, because of this, actually, a friend of mine was saying, well, I think we should look into how do we know that Kevlar paddles are actually made of Kevlar? I
had the same thought.
You know, so who knows? I mean, that I feel like
the only reason that one that I kind of immediately dismissed it was it's early on when this was coming out. It seemed like DuPont was kind of all over people for like how they were using the trademark and whatnot, and like whether or not you could advertise that it was DuPont Kevlar or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that one seemed more legit in terms of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the whole thing was kind of a mess. And I think this goes to show that like companies themselves need to do more homework when they get fed something from the factory. Like at this point, this should be a good lesson that, okay, yeah, your factory tells you it's this. You can't just immediately believe now that it is what they said it is.
Right.
You almost need to do more deeper digging to figure that out.
No, I totally agree. But I still believe that if you like it, you should, like, if you enjoy playing with it, don't be that upset. Just still use it. Like, that's how I feel. I'm like, I enjoy the titanium surface, and I like how it feels, and I like how it plays. I main a paddle that has that surface.
Yeah.
And I, again, literally could not care. You call it scraped moon dust.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what you call it. I play better with it, and I'm going to continue to use it.
Yeah.
That's the end of the day. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
So
I generally agree. I don't know. I see both sides. I think there's some reason to be upset,
definitely
but I think
understand
it's just like what I would be curious to know is if this has happened. If someone really liked it, found that news out and then said, I don't like it anymore.
Oh, I'm sure.
To me, what it sounds like has been happening is not that people go, I don't like titanium anymore. They just go, hey, you lied, and I don't appreciate that you lied to me.
Yes. I almost guarantee there's people out there that stopped using it because they felt like they were lied to or just didn't like that. So
could be.
I don't know. But anyways, J2 Ti.
Yeah.
J2 Ti.
So to me, it kind of just reminded me of like, I mean, it's like if you took a Honolulu paddle, which are very stable, shorter handle, and then put that face on it. And now I have a Shogun in that shape.
Yep. You've got the three realms in the Honolulu paddles, the J2k Pro, the J2k 14, and the J2 Ti. You want a low swing weight, fast poppy paddle, not the best sweet spot, 14. You want poppy, heavier paddle, J2k Pro. You have a more control game, you want to hit drops, dink a lot, J2 Ti. You've got the three realms. They're very, very similar-ish feeling, just what niche do you want it to fit?
Yeah, I mean,
that's
like,
how it works.
Performance-wise, again, it's too bad we didn't have the 16 because I think that would be the almost better comparison than the J2k 14.
Yep.
But it is really funny because it's like, okay, you've kind of just got this same paddle, and now you just make it feel slightly different for each of these paddles.
Yeah.
Like The J2 Ti is going to be a little bit softer, in my opinion, than like a J2k Pro. It's not going to be as aggressive, but now it's a little bit more balanced overall.
Has a little bit better feedback, more feel to the paddle, but not going to hit quite as hard.
Yeah. So it's just kind of their lineup in particular just kind of makes me crack up because I'm like, oh man, how it's, for example, I think Selkirk does a pretty good job currently. Different, like I'm going to take 3 of their paddles. Some of their paddles are getting a little muddy, but let's take the Lux, the Amped Pro, and the Power Air. Very distinctly different and who they're for.
Yes.
Right? Like if you had a chart that was like this wide and you had the Lux for control, the Amped in the middle, and then the Power Air over here, it's not quite like that. The Amped is probably a little closer to the Power Air. Anyways, if you had that, if you took Honolulu's, you just shrink that whole thing and you've got like the J2k 16, the J2k Pro, and then the J2Ti over here.
You literally just squish that graph. Like they're so similar, but it's a similar idea in that like, okay, Power Air, fast, low swing weight, poppy paddle, bad sweet spot. Same thing as the J2k 14. And then the Lux, better sweet spot, more control, more stable, J2 Ti. It's just so much tighter with the Honolulu paddles.
Yeah.
So
that I feel like if I was just a viewer trying to figure out what to pick, I would almost need to just hit them because it's like
100%.
Really small things that might make me sway one way or the other.
You have to know your game style way better to pick out the Honolulu paddles versus Selkirk if you're more getting into pickleball and you want...
It's like more obvious.
It's way more obvious. If you know you're a banger and you want to hit balls hard, you just go buy a Power Air. Yeah. But it's not quite as obvious with Honolulu paddles. So you kind of have to know your game a little bit better and just know the pickleball space a little bit more. So,
but either way, I mean, that's kind of our thoughts on those. Regardless, all of them I thought were very good. Like I could recommend all those paddles
100%
happily. Like they're all very good. It's just that they're kind of similar. So it makes it a little harder to be like, oh, okay, you probably want this one, or like maybe you want this one.
Yep.
All right, next one, Neonic Flare. This will be about as easy as what we just said. I feel like about the J2 Ti. You want a shogun in a standard shape? Boom, here you go.
Yep. Now you get the wide body.
It is a little bit different than that. I think their surface layup is a bit different.
Yes.
If I recall, there's some fiberglass in there. I think it's 3 different layers, and the fiberglass layer I think is on the bottom.
It did have a decent amount of pop in hands battles. It was kind of nice, but it still felt soft, which is why I think I like that. So I don't even know what to call it. Are we still going to call it titanium?
Well, I know.
Now what do we call it? I'm just gonna continue to call it titanium. Yell at me if you want.
See, the problem
I'm gonna
is,
call it that.
I think that is what's going to happen. Is people are just going to keep calling it titanium, but I'm like, this is so confusing if you're new, because then you're going to hear someone say titanium and assume most people know it's like this whole polyester thread thing, but then it sounds weird to say like polyester threads woven into carbon fiber. So it's like,
there's no good way to say it, so I'm just going to continue calling it titanium. Like I said, yell at me if you want. I'm gonna do it.
We need a new thing. I know that's what everyone's going to do, but it's going to get confusing.
I know. But yes, I like this paddle. It had that softer, plush, almost springy feel that you get from titanium, but it did have good pop and hands battles and stuff. Drives obviously aren't going to blow people out of the water. They felt okay.
Especially for a standard shape paddle.
Exactly. So it was just, decent.
People have done exactly what I said when the Shogun came out. I said, I would love to see this in different shapes.
Yeah.
And like people experiment, so you just have options, right? Because when the Shogun came out, it was the only one that had that. Now you kind of have more options of like, you have a hybrid, you have a standard, and I know there's other ones coming out and being made or whatever. So I think that's good. Now you have like the 3 bases covered. You have elongated, hybrid, standard, and people can kind of pick from those. And the value of the Neonic is really good. I think I'm just going to pull it up really quick, but I'm pretty positive that it's like 140.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I feel like it is basically if you want a Valair Forza Mach 2 Forza, but in titanium, it's the Flare. The Neonic Flare is basically that.
Yeah, the Neonic Flare is 150. So after a code, it's probably below 150.
Okay.
Probably in the mid 130s or something like that would be my guess. So yeah, I think that's, for the price, there are paddles.
Dude, I'd take the Neonic Flare over the Series 4 in a heartbeat, and it's less than half the price.
Okay, well, why? The only reason I'm surprised you would say that is because it's a standard.
Yes, but I just like the feel of that more off the Neonic, and give me a dang freaking edge guard, man. I do not want no edgeless paddles. Give me an edge guard.
I think at some point someone's going to figure out the edgeless, or at least I hope they do. But right now it's
not looking good.
There's a very clear separation for the most part of when you're hitting an edgeless paddle and you're hitting a paddle with an edge guard that is built pretty well.
Yeah. I mean, the only two edgeless paddles that I've been slightly okay with, Series 4 didn't feel bad, and the Thompson paddle actually was kind of surprising because they had some interesting technology with how their edge was made, because it was a uniform urethane mold that was manufactured first, and then they put a honeycomb core inside of it. So that was actually kind of interesting. I almost feel like it's a similar feel off the Series 4, but I'm almost sure that's not how Proton's manufacturing their paddles. But it gave me a similar feel to the Thompson paddle, and I thought that was interesting. But all that being said, still not a huge fan of edgeless paddles.
Yeah.
I would 100% always take an edged paddle over an edgeless.
Yeah. At least until someone improves it.
Until someone makes it better, which I just...
And I think, well, especially for, I think the context that matters for this is that that's where it really depends what type of player you are, because you like your paddles to be heavy and on the higher end of swing weight. Edgeless for you doesn't make sense because it starts so far away from where you want it to be.
And even when I've added a ton of weight, like I've taken a Lux and added a ton of weight, perimeter weighting around it, and it still didn't feel as good as if I had a really light edged paddle.
Sure.
Like, I can't say exactly what it is scientifically, but I just, even if it's like, I don't want to get in too deep to it, but the Ripple.
Yeah.
Even at stock weight being 7.7 ounces and like 108 swing weight, that felt way better than an edgeless paddle that's weighted up.
Sure.
There's something about edged paddles that feel way better to me.
I mean, I agree with you. I just think for, like some people, it's going to like that lightness will matter to them. Like they just enjoy how it swings through the air.
100%. And most people that I know that enjoy that are people who have some form of prior injury.
Yeah.
Wrist injury, shoulder injury, something that prevents them from swinging something heavier.
Yep.
That's when it totally makes sense. Totally get it.
Yep.
But I just pray that I do not want edge paddles to ever go away. I don't think they ever would.
Well, I mean, I don't care if they go away as long as someone just makes a better alternative. If you could have a edgeless paddle that performs as good, if not better, than an edge, then yeah, I don't care. Now you don't have to worry about your edge guard coming unglued.
I just don't ever see it happening.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll find out.
But yeah,
yes.
Neonic Flare, very good value. I think it's a really good paddle. It's probably I think that would be the cheapest titanium quotation marks paddle. So that's kind of cool.
It was pretty fast in the hands. I like that. It was overall, I enjoyed playing with it. I actually did like that paddle.
That's another paddle, again, that's like, doesn't do anything wrong. It's great value. A lot of people would probably enjoy this.
That's the thing with today's market. It's just so hard for a company to make a bad paddle.
Yeah.
If you make something extremely bad, it's kind of interesting because I don't know how you did that.
How you did it.
How did you make something this bad? Like it's everything at this point is usable and good.
Yes. All right. We're going to talk about this paddle, but we might have to cut this out of the podcast. I can't remember if they had a note in the box, and I can't remember if that note said, don't talk about this, or if it said, there is no embargo, please talk about this, or you are able to talk about it.
Those are two very different sides.
Yes, I will ask for clarification, but just know you might have to cut this out. Anyways, the Chorus Supercourt. Hang on, I have it.
I was going to say.
You keep talking, I'll go get it.
When you see this paddle, there's very, very different polarizing reactions when people see this. People typically will look at it and say, is that a trainer paddle? Like that's what most people say. Or a couple of the other people have just said, wow, that is one of the ugliest paddles I've ever seen. You'll see it in a second. He's coming back. I personally, I can't do it. It's too ugly.
Okay, here's what's funny about this though, because I grabbed the Neonic flare just so people can see the difference. Okay, so if you're watching the podcast, here is the Neonic flare, right?
Yep.
This is a regular standard shape paddle. People don't really have any complaints about how these look. Now I'm going to show you the supercourt. This is the supercourt.
It just looks so bad.
But here's what's funny, Kate. Yeah, look at this, and it you're like, oh, it looks really weird, tiny face, whatever. But then if I hold up the Neonic behind it, it's not that different.
It's really not.
So it's hilarious how we're probably talking about half an inch here, maybe an inch in some areas of cutoff area. And that is enough to make people go, wow, that's really ugly or that's really cool.
100%. Yeah, I don't know, man. They're very similar in size, but my eyes just tell me I don't like it. I don't like it.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure they're going to do a very limited run of these. This isn't something that's going to be sold.
Yeah, I don't think this is something that they thought was going to be a super big audience catcher.
Honestly, outside of the look, my biggest complaint, and I wish we could kill this off from every paddle ever made moving forward. The handle on this thing is a brick. It is so
really
square.
blocky.
It's literally, I'm trying to look at the camera. You can kind of see it. It's literally a square. I mean, it's just so bad to
It's that
hold.
each of these, the sides and the top are very even, where I think people are used to the sides being longer and the top being
thinner.
being thinner.
Yes. It's too symmetrical.
But it makes some sense, right? Because a lot of Gen 1, this is a Gen 1 paddle, so it is, that's just how a lot of them were. The handles were a little more symmetrical, that, before people were kind of compressing handles in a mold or whatever. So I get why it is the way it is. But I think what's interesting about this, so two things. First, I just applaud Course for trying something different.
100%.
Because I think we see so many people try and do the same thing that it's okay, well, that you could have tried something different. You just kind of copied what everyone else did. So even though this didn't work, in my opinion, I still think this is interesting and it's eye-catching.
I appreciate them trying to do something different.
Yeah.
I do appreciate that. This was just a slight miss.
Yeah, I don't think this one quite landed. And the other conversation that I think this paddle kind of leads into is I think when we got into pickleball, handles across the board were pretty short. I would say on average, you were looking at 4.75, 2.5.
Yep.
Maybe there were a couple with longer.
There's a couple when we got into it, the Engage Encore.
Yeah.
Was it MX?
Well, you could get the MX. I don't remember if the Encore had an MX, but the Pursuit eventually did come out with an MX. The Pursuit Pro.
The Engage, the Encore did have an MX because I remember we have a friend who he played tennis and he used that, and I remember feeling it going because I played with. What did I play with? I played with something with a short handle, and I just remember feeling it going. This thing feels like a tennis racket. It's such a long handle.
Yeah.
So that was one of the only paddles I can think of back then that had a longer handle.
Yeah, so there weren't very many, and then I think as more tennis players came into the game and more people wanted to be able to do a two-handed backhand, they were like, well, I need more space.
Yep.
So I think we've kind of they creeped up a little bit to that 5.5 inch range pretty consistently, and then we had some companies that wanted to try something even crazier just to see if it would stick.
Pushed it over.
So you had Pickleball Apes, they did a 6.25. You had Oya that did 6.5 and 7-inch handles. This Supercourt, I think, is a 6.25 inch handle on a standard shape paddle, which we've never seen before.
But realistically, is more 6.5 with how it tapers. Dude,
Probably.
You've got a lot of real estate.
I can perfectly put two hands on this and it's fine.
Yep.
But I think what is interesting is I think we've now reached the point where we know what is too much.
Yes.
For most pickleball players, I don't think it makes sense to give up this much face just to have that slightly longer handle. Because most pickleball players have accepted for a two-handed backhand, you're just going to put your finger on the back. Yep. If you don't want to, you don't have to.
And honestly, I've done it for so long that it's more comfortable for me to do that than to not have it.
I agree. I completely agree. So I just don't really see a world where you're gaining enough from handles this long to offset having less face. Because I think especially with things like firefights or resets when someone's hitting overheads at you. Like that long handle no longer benefits you at all.
Well, exactly. You don't benefit from the long handle. And two, because you're shrinking the face, you're losing out on the sweet spot shrinks.
Yeah.
Not only are you just having a physically smaller space to hit the ball, the sweet spot has shrunk and now you have a tighter circle to try and hit the ball.
Yeah.
And my biggest issue with extremely long paddles, anything over 6 inches, is on one-handed, like very wristy shots, you can generate a little bit more whip, which is nice. But when you put two hands on, you can't whip through with your wrists anymore, and you actually lose out on so much power because you have less perimeter weighting. So any paddle that I've played with that has anything past a 6-inch handle, I have to load the top of the paddle with lead because it just feels like I'm hitting a pillow. And on top of this being a Gen 1, like the sweet spot is just naturally going to be
Smaller.
worse. It's going to be smaller. It's not going to feel as good. And you're losing out on space. The sweet spot on this did feel
definitely smaller. Yeah.
Very poor.
Yeah.
So, but again, I'm saying a lot of negative things toward this. I don't want to be too mean about it, but I do appreciate that they're experimenting. I like that it's different. And this paddle isn't like, it's not $300. It's not $200.
It's like $110.
Yeah, it's really cheap. So it's not so expensive that if it catches your eye, you think it's interesting, you've never played with something like this, it feels better to buy this, try it, and figure out, do you like it? Do you not like it? It doesn't feel like you invested a ton of money into it, and it's going to feel really bad if you don't like it.
Yeah.
Like if you buy a Power Air, you spend $250 and you don't like it.
Yeah, it hurts.
That kind of hurts, you know? But this
I think this
isn't that bad.
This is why I need to check that note, because I think it doesn't come out for like maybe in October or maybe it's November. I can't remember.
Oh, wow.
Either way, it might be a minute.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it was an interesting idea, but it is just funny how, like, you know, when you really hold these up, not
really,
super different, but when you only see this, you're like, whoa, what is that?
You should put it next to a trainer paddle. Do we have one of those around here?
I do behind that shelf, but we're not going to be able to get behind there.
Yeah, it'd be tough to get that. But it very, by itself, looks very much like a trainer paddle. I thought it's pretty funny.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Interesting concept, but probably not something for the masses.
Yeah, probably
I would
not.
say. Very, very niche. Okay, so those are pretty much our thoughts on some paddles we hit this week. Now we're to the kitchen, and something I wanted to just talk about because it's funny, more friends recently have been talking about this.
It's gotten brought up a ton recently.
It's specifically in like our local groups, and I think it's because I've had more friends asking me like, hey, can I demo some paddles? And
To
I'm like,
try
yeah,
stuff.
Sure, like it's totally fine.
Yep.
So what I want to talk about is switching paddles is bad for your game.
100%.
Now, is this some mind-blowing revelation? No, but I think a lot of people don't think about this.
Mm-hmm.
So what has happened is I'll have some friends come try paddles, and there'll be paddles that they kind of like, and then they use it for a while, and they're like, dude, this is like, I'm just having such a hard time getting used to this. Like, even after they've drilled with it for like a week or two, and they're like, it's just not like my old one. But they've been using their old one for a year and a half, like maybe even some of them 2 years. Like they've been using it for a really long time. So they're just dialed with that paddle.
Yeah.
They know what that paddle is supposed to do. They know how it acts, blah, blah, blah. So now the new paddle doesn't. And it's just kind of funny watching people be like, this is so hard or so annoying to do. And I'm like, welcome to my job.
Yep.
I'm like, this is why I'm not better at pickleball. And like, I'm serious, guys. Like, I would be a better player if I did not switch this often. Like, there are just times where it's not that you're not confident with the paddle, but because there's so much switching, it's just like, you never feel like you fully know the paddle. Like, yeah, you know it, but it's not like something you've been using for 6 months.
Yeah.
Like when I only used like a double black diamond, I was like, yeah, I knew what this paddle could do. And I knew all the situations it was good and
You
bad
knew how
in.
much you had to swing. You knew how hard you had to hit the ball. It was easy.
So it's just funny. I've had some of these friends have been like, how do you do this all the time?
Dude,
and
I
I'm
know.
like,
People say the same thing to me. Like, I'll bring a stack of 5 paddles to try in some, rec games or whatever. And people are like, dude, you're switching again? And I'm like, yeah, I do this all the time. Like, I do this for work.
I do think the more you do it, you get better at switching.
Yes. You understand how certain styles of paddles play. So you kind of have an expectation going into certain paddles.
And you know, like, what adjustment you need to make.
But not everyone is used to that. If someone's used to playing with a short 4.5 inch handle or, something really short and then they go to an elongated paddle, it's going to be completely different, you know?
Yeah, that, or even if you're just talking styles like control. I mean, we'll just give him a shout out on the pod here. We'll see how long it takes him to hear this. But our friend David.
Yes, he's the perfect person I was thinking of.
He had a tournament here in the area and he was using a Lux. Yep. He's a 5-0 guy. He played an open tournament.
Well, before even the Lux, I just give a quick story on this guy. We've been playing with this guy basically since we got into pickleball. And he had been using the Vanguard, the original Vanguard S2 forever. I think he started using the Vanguard 2.0. But anyways, basically we just always called it the S2 because he's like the only person we've ever known to use that paddle.
Yep.
And he's the pickiest person. We try to give him this and that and things that are very similar. He could not get used to anything. He'd be like, nope. It's just not the S2, man. I want to go back to the S2. For years, he would use that paddle. We finally got him to use something different.
We got him to use a Lux.
A Lux. And then
Lux S2.
He actually, it was funny because the 003 came out. He used it for a little while. And he goes, I keep hitting the hole, man. I hate this thing.
Yeah.
And he returned it. Then he bought another one, started using it. Then I think he sold it. And then he bought a Lux S2. And then he stuck with it, and he used that for a while.
I actually think he might have even gone back and forth a couple times.
He did go back and forth a little bit, but then he settled on the Lux. Now,
but anyways, so after this tournament, he was just like, dude, in hands with these guys. Like, I just felt like I was at such a disadvantage with all these people using power paddles. He's like, I just couldn't keep up. So he's like, just give me some power paddles to try. And he, for a minute, he was like dead set. He's like, I'm going to switch to a gearbox. And I was like, no, you're not. First of all, he'd tried the gearbox. He loved it and then hated it after it heated up.
It's very common with him to give him a paddle in a rec, like for a session. And for a couple of games, he goes, dude, this thing, amazing.
But that's actually just a lot of people. If they don't switch.
There's a ton of people.
There's like a honeymoon phase. And then once you play more diverse people or have an off day, have a good day, you're like, oh.
That new paddle feel, baby.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways.
2 weeks later, dude, this gearbox sucks. I can't use it.
Yeah, exactly. So he, anyways, long story short, he's on an Engage now. He's pretty dialed in with it.
Took him like a month and a half to actually get used to playing with the Engage.
And he kept thinking about going back.
Yes, he wanted to go back, but now he finally committed. He's like, I just can't do it anymore. I can't compete with the S2.
Yep.
So he committed to using the Engage, and now he's finally locked in.
Which is a pretty big jump. I think most people, when they're looking to switch, they're not usually making that big of a jump. They're not going from a full-blown control paddle to like a power paddle because he's using a Pursuit Pro EX
16.
Non-16. It's a thinner one.
He's using the 14?
I
thought he was using the 16.
Nope, he's using the thinner one.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, that's a pretty big jump.
Yeah,
but
huge.
All that to say, like, if you just like switching paddles, there's nothing wrong with it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I like trying out all this gear. That's kind of why it became this job.
Yep.
But I also recognize that if my sole goal was to just get better at pickleball, it would be to find a paddle that I generally vibe with. It doesn't have to do everything I need perfect, but most of the things, like 80, 85%, it does everything I need. And then that last 15%, that's just kind of all paddles.
Yep.
And then just stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think people kind of need to understand is, like, we've talked about it before, but there's kind of the three categories: power, all court, control. Within each of those, there's maybe 50 paddles you could probably use.
Oh, yeah.
And be pretty happy with. Or there's 50 paddles to select from, and then maybe within that, there's like 10 paddles that you could play about the same way.
Once you figure out the general style of paddle you like, you figure out what shape do you want to play with, and then inside of the shape, do you want to play with all court, control, power? You figure out those things. They're all so similar.
Like, if I had to, I could make a bigger list, probably if I had more time here. But if I'm just thinking kind of off the top of my head and looking at my wall, if you had a Volair Forza Mach 2, a Neonic Flare, maybe even the Fat Boy, even though it's a little shorter handle, and then like a Pickle Hurricane Pro, for a lot of people, if they can use the Volair, they could probably use those other ones. Now, they may have a small preference one way or another, but largely they could play pretty good pickleball with it. We're not talking about a Volair Forza Mach 2 and then going all the way to a Paddletech TKO. Like, that is going to be really hard. So within that range, you're probably pretty good. So what I feel like I want to explain to people is, you don't need a paddle that does everything for you, because I'm not going to say you're not going to find it, but most people aren't going to find a paddle that does literally every single thing they want. There's always going to be a small thing missing.
There's always trade-offs. right?
Yeah, there's always a trade-off.
Do you want a paddle that accentuates what you're good at, or do you want a paddle that helps you with what you're bad at?
Yeah.
I would rather have a paddle that accentuates what I'm good at and just play into that style than something that kind of helps me with shots that I'm not great at, and then I'm just kind of mediocre at everything I do. You know, like perfect example, one of our pros here, Amrik, he is a former college tennis player. He rips the ball as hard as he can. He just wants to smash the ball. Is he going to play with the Lux because his resets suck? No. He plays with a black ace and he just rips the ball as hard as he can because he knows that's what he's good at.
Yeah.
So I prefer to pick paddles that just accentuate what I do well.
Yeah, totally. So, again, all that to say, it's basically just if you're switching paddles, just know it's probably costing you your game. If you stuck with one for a very consistent amount of time, I think you will improve quicker. There's just more familiarity. You know what to expect from the paddle. You're not second guessing yourself. Like there are times when I'm using a lot of different paddles and it gets really frustrating hopping between them because it's just like, oh my gosh, like I'm just don't feel dialed with anything right now because I've been hopping between. So it can be frustrating.
Oh yeah. It gets your like view and perception of paddles gets so muddied up. Like it's hard to tell. Like it's funny. We were hitting the new 3S's when we were testing those out. And I was like, okay, you know, these aren't as poppy or crazy as like the Gen 3s and whatnot. And then I went to the J2 Ti and I was like, dude, I can't hit nothing with this. It feels so soft.
Yeah.
And then took a couple days off, hadn't played much. Then we went and tested all the paddles we talked about today. I hit the supercourt. I was like, man, this thing's really soft. And then I hit the J2 Ti and I was like, oh, I've got some pop now and it feels pretty good. And I was like, so it's
almost like I can't remember if it's for wine testing, but like you need like a palate cleanser.
Yes.
You need like a reset, like you need a break from certain things so you can have better perspective on these other things. Because yeah, like if you hit a mod, everything's soft compared to a mod, or doesn't hit hard,
or a gearbox,
or whatever.
It's like your idea of how paddles feel changes so much. You know, your recency bias is huge.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
So yeah, we find a paddle. Stick with it. That's my recommendation. Unless you just love gear, which is absolutely nothing wrong with.
Nothing wrong with that. If you like just hitting new paddles all the time, which I know plenty of people like that, great. But if you're really serious about trying to get as good as you can, don't do what we do. Because I guarantee we would probably be better, excuse me, if we just stuck with one paddle.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I would not be 3.5 at best if.
Well, I don't know if we go that far. All right, that might be stuck with you.
Yeah, I might just be stuck. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I got. You got anything else?
Not really. I don't think so. No.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll catch you next week.
See ya. Peace.